Any business owner understands that setting their prices or their fees, as we call it in dentistry, is a very important element of the business success. If you set your fees too high, you might not have enough patients in dentistry, or if you're in business, enough customers. And if you set it too low, you can be plenty busy, but you're not making any money. And that's the reality of most PPO prices. They're plenty busy, but they're not making any money because they're giving away so much of it to the PPO plan. Now I'll share a little bit behind the curtain. In our coaching work, one of the common situations, the most common situation, is a new client becomes a client, and he or she, when I ask the question, what percent of your patients are PPO patients, the average is between 80 and 85%. 80 and 85%. Very rarely do we see something different than that. You may be an exception. But there are very rare occasions when I ask the question, and when we ask the question, we don't just pull the number out of our hat. We pull the number from your practice management software, and the number's right there. We can pull it through a report. What percentage of the patients are PPO patients? And we can run that report and we can compute the percentage. But on rare occasions, the number is a smaller number. It's 40%, 30%, 35%. But that is such an exception. The majority that we see, the average is between 80 and 85% of your patients are PPO. So if that's you and you're thinking, oh, I could never do this because I have such a high percentage of PPO patients, that actually is the norm. That is the norm. Now, if 80 to 85% of your PPO patients are 80 to 85% of your patients are PPO patients, you're not setting your fees for them. You're letting the bean counters at the insurance company set your fees. Which, how much sense does that make? Let's think about that for a minute. None. You're letting an entity that doesn't care one little bit about your business. Delta doesn't care one little bit. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Travelers, United Concordia, Connection Dental, they don't care one bit about your fees. And you're letting them set your fees. But let's talk about what happens over time. Over time, if you're a dominant practice that has a dominant number of patients that are PPO patients, oftentimes you completely lose touch of what usual and customary fees are for services in dentistry, because for 80 to 85% of your patients, it's immaterial. And if that number is 85%, you might think, well, if I raise my fees, I'd only be raising them on the 15% of my patients that are uninsured, or sometimes called cash patients. Cash patients. Sometimes that's how dentists refer to, well, I've got 15% that are cash. Maybe another way to more accurately refer to them would be uninsured. And many times dentists think, is it fair to raise their fees when they have to pay my full fee, when I can't raise the fees on the other 85% of my patients? And very often the thinking kind of creeps into your mind of trying to be fair, to the 15% that don't have insurance. And as a result, you keep your fees just static there. You're happy that you're getting that because you're not getting on the other 85% of your practice. But over time, it doesn't reflect your increased cost of doing business. In fact, you lose touch of what should be a usual and customary fee for services because you're not getting it 85% of the time. Does that make any sense, Naren?
Absolutely, Gary. Absolutely.
And what kind of managerial thinking creeps in at that point? What do you think happens?
You mean, I think people just give up.
Yeah, you give up, so I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And you lose touch of what fees are.